Well, hello and welcome to Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. I'm Scott Fisher, and I'm glad you've chosen to study with me today. The beard and shaggy hair is due to the imposed government-mandated shutdown. I'm calling it my Corona beard. Well, it's been an interesting year. It's actually been just over a year since I last posted a video teaching, and I've had numerous inquiries asking why and numerous requests to get back at it. If you follow me on Facebook or Twitter, you may have seen my recent post regarding the reaction to the coronavirus. I've been calling it the Corona hysteria, intentionally blowing up the global economy and shutting businesses down with arbitrary designations of essential and non-essential and forcing millions into unemployment has been a historically unprecedented step. And for saying that, I've been excoriated by some as not caring that people are dying. I'm not going to rehash all that right now, but if you haven't yet, I encourage you to study some of the alternative views from the mainstream majority view. It's been very interesting, and the reaction to the coronavirus scare is a study in human psychology. And yes, it applies to how we study and interpret the Bible, eschatology, and history. Most people are followers. We're supposed to accept what we're told, don't question, and for sure, don't contradict. Sit down, shut up, and conform. We followed the sky is falling claims that models projecting widespread death rate assumptions that have not even come close to being accurate. How does that apply to our study today? Well, it's the same mentality of accepting what we've always been taught, not asking questions, not being exposed to alternative views, living in a cultural and religious bubble. I'm 62 years old. I grew up in the home of a conservative, Bible-believing pastor. My dad was not a hypocrite. He preached the word, he preached devotion to Jesus, he poured his life into making disciples, true followers of Jesus. He spent the last 30 years of his ministry pouring into the lives of pastors around the world, throughout Africa and Asia, mostly in India and the Philippines. Growing up, the only view of eschatology I was ever exposed to was dispensational premillennialism, the teachings popularized in the Scofield Reference Bible and later by Hal Lindsey in his book, The Late Great Planet Earth. It wasn't until I was a young adult that I was even exposed to a different view. I was in my early mid-20s. I remember as a young teenager wondering if I would ever have the opportunity to marry and have children because we were living in the last days and Jesus was ready to come back and it could be at any moment. And it was hard to criticize that. Do you not want Jesus to come back? So I accepted it. I didn't question the validity of the claim. After all, it's in the Bible, isn't it? Well, thanks to the writings of Hal Lindsey and then the Left Behind series by Tim LaHaye, the influence of Chuck Smith, the founder of Calvary Chapel and one of the leaders of the 1960s Jesus movement, and the influence of Dallas Theological Seminary and the Bible Church movement, dispensational premillennialism has become the leading view of end times by Christians across denominational lines. In fact, even secularists have embraced a view of the cataclysmic end of the world. A yet future end of the world as we know it is the mainstream view today. Everything in all of history, according to that view, has been moving toward this coming end. The world will be destroyed, burned up. The mountains will literally melt. But before that happens, there'll be growing chaos and calamity, and then suddenly Jesus will return and rapture his church. The majority of Christians believe some variation of that. They believe that Bible prophecy spoke of our day. In fact, Hal Lindsey was so bold that he labeled us the terminal generation. That may be shocking to you, but I do not subscribe to that view. I do not believe the Bible speaks of an end of the world at some point in our future. In the Old and New Testaments, there are prophecies of a coming end, but we have to ask the question, end of what? An end of the world? A cataclysmic destruction of the planet? That's what most people think. What if there is no such future destruction of planet Earth and a future end of the world as we know it? Is it possible that the biblical writers were speaking of something other than the end of the world? If so, what could they have been speaking of? Well, let me say first, if you have never considered that possibility, don't get defensive and don't be intimidated. Whatever view you hold it because you believe it to be true. Challenging long-held and widely held beliefs is difficult. It's hard to swim against the stream. Take your time, study, read books and writings from outside your bubble. Truth can stand up to reason and inquiry. My personal journey toward embracing a different view than the one I grew up believing has been a process, and frankly, I'm still learning. So, what could the biblical writers have been speaking of when they wrote about a coming in their future end? I believe the end that they spoke of was the end of the Old Covenant era and the transition from the Old Covenant to the New Covenant. It was an end of the world as they knew and understood it, but it was not the end of the planet. It was the end of the Judaistic system, the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. For the first century Jews who rejected Jesus as their promised Messiah, his crucifixion was the culmination of their rejection of God as ruling over them. The next 40 years following his crucifixion and resurrection was a turning upside down and inside out of all that the Jews had ever believed about themselves, their city, their temple, their priesthood, their entire way of life. And in AD 70, it all came crashing down. The end of all things, as they understood it, had come about. Judgment had come. And just as Jesus had warned them, quote, not one stone was left upon another of the temple during the destruction of Jerusalem. Now, if you're willing to study, to ask questions, if your desire is to know the truth, to learn what the Bible actually says, then I invite you to join me right here on Musings of a Texas Preacher Man. My plan is to post a teaching 4 times each week on Mondays through Thursdays. I'll post a link on Facebook and Twitter, and if you'll click the subscribe button in the lower right corner of your screen, you'll be notified whenever I post a new video. Well, I hope you'll go out and make today a great day. Be safe, be blessed, and join me right here again tomorrow.